If you want to have longevity in this business, you got to like this business. And nothing brings people more long-term satisfaction than being a part of a community and feeling like they're a useful member of that community. When you go out and you're of any walk of life and you just hold the posture that I'm going to prosper by helping others, you'll find that you're satisfied, which means you'll work harder. You'll be inspired to do things that you can't just talk yourself into if your mission statement is simple as, how do I make $1 right now?
In this insightful and inspiring conversation, we sit down with Bryan Smaller, a seasoned colorist and filmmaker, to explore the intricate balance between art and science in the creative industry. Bryan dives into the challenges of building a sustainable career in film, emphasizing the importance of collaboration, community, and finding your guiding principles. He offers profound insights on how embracing the process can lead to long-term success and fulfillment. Through personal stories and real-world examples, Bryan highlights why helping others and building strong creative relationships are key to thriving in any artistic field. We know you'll get a lot of value out of this conversation with Bryan Smaller. I read that at 8 years old, you told your dad that one day cameras would capture images that look better than real life. And where did that thought come from at such an early age?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on this. I don't know where you read that. Here's what happens is I do these interviews and I encourage the other side to be ask candid questions because you're going to get candid answers. And that means that you're going to catch things that I've said in the past that I don't even remember saying. But that is true. What happened, though, or the way I recall it, was my dad saying that these cameras are getting better and better and better. At some point, they already look like real life, and I kind of made the joke as a kid that one day they're going to be better than real life. And at the time, it didn't mean much to me, but it stuck with me enough to remember that conversation. And I think that it probably, 8 years later, I'm saying to myself, I'm literally working in the pursuit of making sure that's always the case, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't just mean through lighting or through cinematography, but of course that graduates ultimately in my life to color correction. And I don't know if that was the first moment where I may have been indirectly thinking about color correction back when I didn't know anything about color correction, but I have a hard time thinking of an example where that would have been earlier than that. Yeah.
That's cool, because then I also read that you directed your first commercial at 14.
Yeah.
You're just impressing me left or right, because you're thinking about images at 8 years old. And so maybe, I guess, were you raised in a creative house, or like how did you direct your first piece at 14?
Yeah.
And how were you thinking about images at 8? Is that like, what was it? I guess, what was your upbringing like?
Well, my dad's an accountant.
Okay.
So that speaks to one side of my brain.
Yeah.
And my mom would stay at home, but always had a craft. Whether that was the scrapbook to making my Gengar Pokemon costume at Halloween, like always crafty. So complete right brain, left brain raising. And today, it's quite clear that everything that I love to do the most is a combination of where art and science meet, right? The other one empowers, right brain empowers the left brain empowers the right brain. So color correction, you can imagine how the technology is bolstering the aesthetics.
Yeah.
I also play guitar. So, just as you're seeing in my color suite, I've got like a couple of pedals, I'm putting together. And there's, the logical, scientific part mixed with the creative part. I like to code, right? And so programming everything from a UI to a database requires left brain and right brain. And so when I think about the things that like I'm doing for fun, creatively, they always have
Yeah.
a part of art and science. And so you're asking me about what it was like to direct, or where did I come up with the idea to direct in high school. And it started where I see TV production. I didn't know this was going to change everything
the whole thing,
for me. Yeah. And so in TV production, you know, we had a full studio, multi-camera, 4-camera studio. And the first project, the one that I count as like my first professional project, also at age 14, was for Reader's Digest. In the Midwest, anyone from the Midwest might know about a magazine drive where Reader's Digest or maybe Scholastic will go ahead and solicit junior high students to go door to door selling magazine subscriptions in exchange for prizes. Well, my mom's volunteering for this for my younger brother who's still in middle school, and so I have a direct line to Reader's Digest, an indirect line to Reader's Digest, and I said, hey, listen, rather than you guys just having the principal over the announcements just read some extremely boring encouragement to keep kids to go out and sell magazines that week, why don't you go ahead and have me make a weekly video?
Nice.
That you can wheel in on a big TV, everyone's favorite part of class in middle school.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can go ahead and show them a video that's made by someone only slightly older than them.
Yeah, yeah.
And it'll come off from the most authentic voice that you can't even buy, right? And I remember they were like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling so good knowing that, wow, I'm helping out a company that's much bigger than I am. And I'm having a blast and I'm being creative doing it. So that's all where it started.
Yeah.
And so going into that, you could imagine where cinematography starts being just a part of it, that
you start kind of discovering the different elements that go into it.
And ultimately you could kind of see where that's going from post into color.
Dude, that's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
I love that story.
Yeah.
Like, that is so cool because, okay, you're doing all these things, you're learning, okay, now you're learning post, and something happens in post, and like, where did you then, at what point, I guess, did you start thinking about the whole color thing? And where did that kind of go from?
Yeah. I mean, in high school, as I'm directing and I'm being a cinematographer and a producer, and I'm wearing a lot of hats, but also soliciting a lot of help, hiring a lot of help.
Yeah.
I found that cinematography, there's just that magic to it that I want to be a part of. And being someone from the Midwest, that's not a job. Right? I don't know anyone in film, much less anyone who doesn't go to work every day at a place. Right? And so I'm thinking about that. And at the same time, I have a huge appreciation for editing. And so I'm pursuing editing. I'm pursuing all things. This is the days of Video Copilot and Andrew Kramer. And I am diving into every single video, rapidly grabbing onto everything. And I'd go out and shoot my own thing so that I could go ahead and implement his videos, And so I'm learning visual effects and I'm learning editing.
Okay.
And so as I'm thinking about going to school, I'm going to pursue editing. So, I went to Columbia in Chicago for a summer before my while I was in high school. And then I went to Hofstra in New York pursuing TV, film, post-production, editing. And when I started working in editorial right there, I'm just, August birthday, I'm like, of course, my first semester, I'm working at a post house, right?
Nice.
And I started attending color sessions. I was working in an editorial post house called Red Car, and in New York. And I started attending color sessions. And I remember that first color session I went to, and it was for Docalax constipation medicine. and oh my gosh. And I remember people going there going, gosh, we want to be doing features. We want to be doing, and I'm there going, oh my, look at this guy. Look what he's doing. This is so cool. And not only that, but it was an SD to HD retransfer. So they were literally A/B matching what they had already done on the previous tape. And I remember thinking to myself, gosh, this is everything I love about editing, everything I love about cinematography, wrapped into one, and it has the bonus of requiring the collaboration to be spoken through the language of poetry. The clients that are in their room are speaking very indirectly to the colorist.
Yeah.
They're using language of art because that's the most effective language to accomplish a look and inspire an idea. That playground right there, I saw a lot of potential in. And the second thing that I was seeing was this guy's hanging film. It's an SD to HD retransfer. He's hanging the film. So he's reaching for telecine tools. And I'm thinking about it through the lens of doing all of my color correction in After Effects, because I can't touch Apple Color because it looked like had no vibe. There's no vibe. And so I remember thinking, what if he did lens distortion? What if he added grain? What if he went ahead and did like a tilt shift effect? And I'm thinking about color correction with these tools in mind, coming into, and as I'm thinking about pivoting, and pretty much that was the day I started pivoting, I'm thinking about there's a huge part of color correction that has overlap with visual effects. And it wasn't really until I started my move to LA a couple years later and I started color correcting that I started to find that I appear to be one of the only people who's embracing this overlap. And so I started working at Company 3 when I was 20. And at that time, I mean, not all the colorists were in DI. Some of them were still hanging film. And I'm coming into it from the perspective of visual effects and cinematography. And I'm reaching for looks that were new, certainly new to me. And I wasn't seeing a lot of people reaching for visual effect tools, you know, back in 2013. But when I came to Company 3, I came in as an assist, and I remember it being very challenging to go from an assist to being a colorist. And at that time, I was actually also in school. So I'm 20. In fact, 20 means that at a company function,
you're having less fun.
Can I pick up a beer? I don't know. I'm not picking up a beer. I can't pick up a beer, right?
Right. Yeah.
Does anybody even know if I'm 20? Will they know if I'm 20 if I don't pick up a beer? Like, I don't know. I'm figuring all this out. Yeah. And so I remember that. And I remember I'm working at Company 3 full time. And I'm a night assist, which means that it's my role to take all the material, ingest it, conform it, prep it for a session that's going to happen the next morning. And it's me and 2 other assists, right? And all at night. And I'm also in school at Chapman in Orange County, 2 hours away, going to school full time. And I am building a book of clientele, so I'm coloring every day. Somehow. So you can do the math and you're going, wait a minute.
It doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. And so basically what I did was I stacked all my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I worked the other 5 days. Of course, there goes the pitch again. I pitched to my boss, hey, you don't have to pay me overtime if I'm not hitting my 40 hours because I'm not working on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So you can put me on Saturdays and Sundays, relieve your staff who doesn't want to work on the weekends, and pay me without overtime.
Nice.
This is a huge win, right?
Yeah.
And so he loved that, right? And I love that. And so it also meant that while I'm working these insane hours, I mean, I'm eating meals in the car. Like, I'm eating burritos because I can eat them with one hand and I can drive with the other hand. I mean, that's the level of insanity. And I felt like, I didn't know how I was going to survive. And I'm glad I did, because ultimately it gave me the grit to work ridiculously hard. And I probably have spent all of my 20s working about 10% harder than I should have. But I'm glad I made it to at least 100%. Because I think my project for my 30s is going to be trying to figure out how to just be. How do I just not work for a second, and not get anxiety and not feel like that's more exhausting than running around, you know?
And there's a lot of really fun stuff that you're touching on. But the thing that kind of keeps coming back is what you touched on earlier of the balance of art and science.
Yeah.
Because you were saying how you were hearing this poetic ways of describing what people wanted to see. And I think that's one of the things that I, like, even in my own experience with color, you just feel like there's no standard language, or there isn't really.
Right.
You know, people just, like you said, they're just like maybe evoke, and it feels almost musical, especially as you were talking. Like I kind of thought of the correlation of the music part, maybe of your, you know, but then you're also very deep in the tools.
Right.
You know, and are you, now that you've probably, I'm assuming that you've really mastered the tools, are you more continuing to develop that artistry, that part of you that's, you know, the art, or how are you balancing that? Or is there one that kind of wins over the other one at times, or how do you work through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I'll put it this way. I'll answer the question with a story, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I first started coloring at Company 3, I did it because I couldn't do everything. I can't go to school full time and color literally like probably more than half of Chapman's thesis films, like, you know, maybe 20-minute films per semester, and work full time and be a good employee and be a good student and be a good colorist. I can't do everything. And so I made an agreement with my boss that I would get clients in the door. They'll pay about more than 10 times what he pays me, and it's a win for me because I'm able to do it all somehow. And it's a win. Honestly, I'm thankful for it. It might have been chump change to the company, but it was everything to me.
Right.
And having that opportunity meant that, okay, now I need to perform. And that doesn't mean I need to perform for my client. And so what that meant was, these clients, they don't have a lot of money, right? But I need to do good work, which means that I need to do a lot of good work in a little amount of time so that I don't cost this client more than he can afford to do, right? And so I learned to be extremely fast at color correction. And honestly, if you've played video games before and you got an eagerness to learn to do something quickly, you'll learn it. Yeah. And I remember learning, I was probably one of the fastest colorists at our company pretty quickly. Yeah. That's not to say that the best colorist starting off, of course not, but certainly one of the fastest. And that was through necessity. But one of the things that I was learning was that it is very easy to learn these tools, and it is a lot harder to learn the art of collaboration. 10% of the artistry that survives onto that screen is a function of the art strictly between myself and that panel. 90% of the artistry, I'm giving it the credence that it deserves, it's the art of color correction, is in that collaboration. Because if you've got the most brilliant ideas in the world, but you can't communicate them, and you can't connect the story, illustrate the perspective of your character through these ideas you have on the board, none of your ideas are going to survive. Right. People will see that, right? Yeah. They only see the final, right? And so I very quickly learned that the art of color correction is the collaboration. You learn this right away. That was my story of how I learned it. A lot of people know this through all forms of creative collaboration, that's the hardest part. You know, all your war stories are challenging collaborations. Yeah. Maybe some technical circumstance, but they're the collaborations. That's where the art is. Yeah. That's what counts. And so when I'm thinking about sharpening and getting stronger as a colorist today, I'm reaching for new tools and learning new ways to accomplish things. But my greatest new successes are coming from the collaborations and that I can contribute to filmmakers' careers bigger than any given project. And when I think about what gets me excited every day, it's less to do with the medium and it's less to do with the single project, and it has everything to do with building the aesthetics and the careers of filmmakers, building up the looks that someone's striving for, building up the projects they want to be a part of. Let me steer you. And that includes everyone from a director to a cinematographer to a producer to a musical artist. Everyone here has a vision, as vague or as specific as that might be. I'm there for it, and I want to be there for it, and that's my pursuit. That's my mission.
I love that. It just seems like, generally speaking, we put so much focus on how do you do things? How do you there's you go on YouTube and it's all how-tos, and it's all how to use blah, blah, blah. But you're saying it's 90 this and 10% this.
Yeah.
Typically, we give 90% of the attention to the tools and 10% of the attention to the artistry. Yeah. And maybe I'm generalizing things, but it feels that way. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think that is? Is it just a lack of maybe thought leadership in having these conversations that we kind of flip the script, or is it? Yeah, what do you think? Why do you think we just focus so much on the other things?
I think it's because it's comfortable to reach for a tutorial that has a beginning, middle, and end, especially the tutorial that has like a couple of videos, because there's a measurable sense of progress. I mean, when you're reaching for technical tools and you have a process to learn those tools, you can measure and you can feel good knowing that you're making progress, and you are. But even the people who might be blind to the larger challenge that is the collaboration know that that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Because all they need to have is probably their first experience to realize, gosh, I had these ideas and I wish it turned out this way and it didn't. Right? And so I think that it's probably, the answer to your question is that I think it's probably the comfortable path.
Yeah.
But I think it is well understood that the hardest part of any art form is the collaboration.
And it's probably also, we really love shortcuts.
Yeah, sure.
And it feels like if I watch this video,
then I'll know how to color that movie.
Yeah. I think collaboration, I mean, it's just everything in this art form, and from because you stand at a point of the process that, when you're starting out or when you're working maybe on smaller projects, like you're not really coloring yet, or you are, but not, it's not part of the pipeline as it becomes as important maybe down the road, like bigger projects. But the collaboration, I mean, that's from day one.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the most important, whether it's skills or even character traits that we should develop that would help be better collaborators or better, because there's so many things. I mean, there's communication, there's just working with people, and there's feedback, how to give feedback, how to receive feedback. There's so many things.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, from your perspective, what are some of the things that you're like, okay, this is very important?
Yeah. I'll speak kind of generally, and if I meander, you can keep me honest. How does that sound? So, I mean, I think that one of the things that you mentioned a second ago, that my creative process might happen on day one, and that might be before I'm actually coloring. That's directionally accurate, but I want to go even farther than that, is to say that I'm collaborating now on films that I'm not going to color for years. And I'm doing that through the relationships of building the aesthetics and the politics, just the overall collaboration. What's that shorthand we're going to build up? What's that rapport going to look like? with filmmakers. I'll give you a great example of how this is developed. Nico Aguilar is one of the most talented DPs that I have the pleasure of working with. And he and I have done probably 10 feature films over the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And we were doing features when we first started doing short films. We were never we were never completely satisfied, but we were perfectly comfortable sitting together unsatisfied. And it quickly became clear to me when working with him that the most fun part of this is thinking about is honestly building up our rapport. And it's building up him as a cinematographer, finding his voice, right? So that when he says that, Bryan, can you make sure those are my greens? That's what he says to me.
That's cool.
Make sure those are my greens. I got it. Nico, I got it, right? The most rewarding projects are projects that I'm doing with a cinematographer like him, because I know that what that means is that when I'm color correcting something, I am being sensitive to the entire context around the filmmaking process. That means I'm making sure that I am keeping him abreast to moving politics. I mean, I should have prefaced this with features have significantly more politics than short form does. And that means that, to go back to what I was saying earlier, the best work comes from the most successful traversal of that politics. Politics is just another word for collaboration. And so when I'm thinking about work that Nico and I are doing, we're talking about building his voice as like he has a very single source, practical or God rays. That's part of his aesthetic, right? And so even when he's in pre-production on a movie, even if I'm not coloring the movie, he and I are talking about that film, right? So when we were first doing movies together, these movies were like, a couple, like maybe $250,000 was the budget of our first film, I think, feature film. And now he's going on, and his last film was he got to work on, he shot Rodrigo Prieto's directorial debut, and he also shot his second unit DP with Rodrigo on Killers of the Flower Moon.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, that's incredible.
Kind of a big deal.
But I mean, what's happened between now and then? I mean, so Killers, I didn't work on that film, but he and I are talking about art and the approach to everything around it. That's fun, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so on previous films, earlier this film we had two films come out. One of them was called Chupa, with Jonas Coron was the director, and another one was Fool's Paradise. Charlie Day's directorial debut. Both of those movies spanned a couple of years, at least. And in both of those films, I was talking to him about well before it was clear that I'm even color correcting it. Because again, I'm here, the most rewarding part of this process is for me to build up his aesthetics, build up his voice as a filmmaker, help him to get onto projects that I have visibility to.
Yeah.
That steer him towards things that are consistent with his voice, right? And to just overall help him be a better collaborator in a larger context than just between me and these panels.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, what you asked was, what advice would I offer to help people strengthen their collaborations? And I think that it would be find a couple of people that you work with all the time, right? Even find someone that you just like working with a lot, because those are the kinds of people who are going to take a creative chance with you, as opposed to me working with a first-time filmmaker. I might have to be safer because I don't know their sensibilities. And when you do that, you will not only riff creative ideas that you wouldn't have had you not built a shorthand, but you'll also organically learn to collaborate, because the posturing that can happen between any two strangers, when those walls come down, the best art ever produced is likely a result of when those walls came down.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to your trajectory as, because you touched on a mission before, and you were talking about, you see this is kind of my mission, and even you were talking about like going into your 30s and beyond, but you from your examples or the stories of your kind of start, you were already kind of thinking like, how do I, you were saying like, I offer these people and I negotiated this thing and I came here, but you were really thinking like, how do I make the whole thing better?
Yeah.
You're not just thinking, how do I make pretty pictures? You're thinking, how do I make this organization better? How do I make this person better? And I think that's really commendable.
How do I help people?
Yeah, how do you help people? And I think that like makes me, respect you even a lot more just hearing those things from you, because you're also having a really long-term mindset where you're thinking, okay, you've already reached a certain point, but you're thinking, how do I take this even further into, having longevity in this industry, and it's continuing to now develop people or help people find their voice. Yeah. Find how they want to, guide people. And I think that's, it just speaks a lot to you about you as a person and your character. So that's...
Well, I appreciate you saying that, first of all. Take it strictly from a business and practical standpoint. Like, if you want to have longevity in this business, you got to like this business. And nothing brings people more long-term satisfaction than being a part of a community and feeling like they're a useful member of that community. Mm-hmm. So when you go out and you're of any walk of life and you just hold the posture that I'm going to prosper by helping others, and you keep it simple. You don't try to overthink it. Like, you don't think, how am I going to make a nickel by helping this person today? Because if you just look at it more broadly, is if you just go out there and try to help people, you'll find that you're satisfied, which means you'll work harder and you'll live longer and you'll be inspired to do things that you can't just talk yourself into if your mission statement is simple as, how do I make $1 right now? You know what I'm saying?
What is your mission statement?
My mission statement as a filmmaker, and I don't encourage everyone to take this on, but I do encourage everyone to have focus in what it is that is their North Star. Mine is to bolster and to strengthen and to build the aesthetics of filmmakers and build their careers, which is way broader than color correction. But the beauty of that mission statement is that it gives me focus when thinking about all walks of my career. When I'm thinking about whether or not it makes sense to, I've been at Company 3 for coming up on 11 years, right? And in that time, there's been I've had many opportunities to color in another place. And rather than looking at it from the perspective of, I want to make sure that I am wholly loyal to Company 3, I instead look at my mission statement, which is to help filmmakers, right, build their careers. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking long term, like, I want to see Nico, as an example, working on bigger and better films that are fulfilling to him. And so when I think through that lens, I'm going, Company 3 is a great partner for me, right? Mm-hmm. And when I think of Company 3 as my venue, and I look at my mission as serving my clients, that North Star takes a lot of the ambiguity about, am I going to make a career mistake, off the table, I
love that you use the word serve.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're looking at your work through the lens of service, and because that again goes back to your desire to help people, and to bring people up and to serve, and it's a very noble way of looking at it. How important do you think is to kind of think about, what is my mission statement, or how did you come to that conclusion of, like, I want to have a mission statement?
You could speak more broadly about life. And if you live your whole life reactive, which most people do, including myself, but you try to minimize it. If you live your whole life reactive, life will entirely feel like rolling the dice. Every day will be just what happens today, and did I do the thing I should have done given the circumstance? And that makes difficult decisions more difficult. And that makes decisions that aren't on your plate unconsidered. You're not going to consider taking a chance if it didn't come right to you, right? You're not going to reach out to someone when it's just comfortable to just not, right? And so having a mission statement, maybe even just for your life, the goal here is to how do I boil down the reason I'm doing this into the simplest term, so that way anytime you need to make a decision, you have the clarity of thought to make one that you know will be the most rewarding to you. And that mission statement does not need to be my mission statement. Your mission statement could be that I want to do the most rewarding art possible, right? To me, that's okay. That's going to be you can look at that being selfish, but be truthful to your mission statement. And what that will mean is that some projects you're just not going to want to do. And if you're true to your mission statement, you'll grow the kinds of projects you want to be doing. So if you just don't want to do another Chevy commercial, if your mission statement makes it clear the reason you're doing this, you might want to turn down the Chevy commercial, even if it feels foolish. For me, I want to do the Chevy commercial as long as the filmmakers are fun to work with, right? And so like a documentary is a beautiful example of that, where like as a filmmaker, I'm not going to take the medium of documentary where maybe the story is asking that I keep it transparent and honest, and I'm not going to go impress upon that I want to go ahead and take the boldest strikes at footage if that's not serving the footage, right? So I'm perfectly happy. In fact, I want to do what's right for that project because I know it's in service of the film and the filmmakers. But knowing that, I guess to boil it down, knowing your mission statement in all walks of your life helps you have peace in the choices you're making.
It applies to every aspect of your life, not just work, not just, it's just if you have, like you said earlier, a North Star that's guiding all of your decisions, then it really brings a lot of clarity, as you're speaking, I feel like, okay, that having that North Star just feels like a lot of the noise outside kind of goes, whoo, okay, there's this thing I'm pursuing, there's this kind of guiding principles in my life that are helping me make decisions, that are helping me, say no to these things, say yes to these things. So it's really powerful. I love that thought. Now, I guess maybe, let's say I am working and I'm busy and I'm trying to just get through and I'm maybe struggling getting the work that I want to do, and I'm thinking, man, I don't have time to work on a mission statement right now.
Yeah.
But there's still ways that you can start developing, at least in the back of your head. Like what are those guiding principles that then maybe will turn into a mission statement, and I'll find that clarity. Like maybe what would you say, what would you do, I guess, in that case?
I use the word mission statement as that's a very business term, right? But of course you could tell that I'm applying it to all walks of life.
Sure.
But that's because people have heard of a mission statement and it's very clear.
Yeah.
It's very dry. But really, what is a mission statement? But it is guiding principles. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. It's basically a business's guiding principles.
Right.
But when you're thinking about your life, you could use that word when you're in an interview. But really, what you're trying to do is just make sure you know what's important to you.
Yeah.
And the idea of selling out, well, it's only selling out if it's not if you're basically trading $1 for something that's not consistent with your guiding principles, mm-hmm. right? So it doesn't take a lot of time to know your guiding principles. Here's a good place to start. What makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
I think you'll find on balance that most people they're not very good at noticing that they're happy when they're happy, but they're great at noticing when they're sad. Right? But if you actually take stock in when you're happy, I think you'll find that it's almost always when you're with people and you're improving someone else's life. When you're making your friends laugh. Does anything make anyone happier than telling your friend a joke that's off color that you can only tell that friend and you're making them laugh, and that's fun.
Yeah.
Like, right? And so when you think about your guiding principles, you're guiding yourself, and it doesn't need to be it can be a selfish pursuit, but you're going to find that most people will find that they'll live a happier life if their guiding principles are things that improve the lives of others.
I thought about this quote earlier. It's this quote from Simon Sinek that says, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. And I think you have definitely found your passion, and you continue to really go even deeper into it. But there's just so much to say about finding something that you truly love and care about and wanting to do it in service of others. But when you think about things this way, it really, it just feels like so much bigger than I want to work with this brand, or I want to shoot my first feature. Like, it's really just about, you found something you're truly passionate about, and you're just finding ways to even, love the craft more, and then help others. Like, it's just more, it's more important to me as we're talking, than, again, a specific project or something like that. So I think that's really cool. I love thinking about that through that lens of, finding that passion.
Yeah, I have another quote. I wish I knew the guy who came up with this one, but I don't. I think it's pick your torture.
Yeah.
And the reason I like that quote is because when I hear quotes about if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Sure.
That quote gives me a lot of stress. Because sometimes I'm working, and it makes you question, did I mess up?
Yeah.
Did I pick the wrong career here? And then I'm sitting in a place right now, and I have no question that that's not the case. But when I hear a quote like that you'll never work a day in your life, it makes you take stock in whether or not it might hold you to an impossible standard, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And the reason I like pick your torture is because if you find something you love to do, and even when it's exhausting, you wake up in the next morning and you're down to do it again.
Yeah.
You might have found your passion. So it's not so much that you should look at hard work as the enemy or as a warning signal. I think you should just decide of whether or not you like working hard in doing whatever you're doing.
I wanted to quickly touch on just the lens that we look at ourselves through dangerously daily, which is our phones and the Instagram and the comparison. How do you deal with that? Like, how do you remove yourself from that? How do you, I'm just, thinking, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I definitely do not have all the answers on this one. Or on really anything, but I know that this is not a strength of mine. And the question is basically like, how do you not compare yourself all the time, right? Because, let's put it this way. When you think about your friends' failures, or honestly, the failures of anyone other than yourself, it doesn't strike you really, it doesn't impress upon you in really any meaningful way at all. You don't feel the weight of someone else's failure. In fact, I would even argue that like an entrepreneur or a filmmaker who goes out, makes a movie and it fails, most of us go, you fucking went for it. I don't even know if you can swear on this podcast, but I guess we're taking a chance.
Go for it.
But you went for it. Like, people kind of look up to that, right?
Yeah.
So why is it that we're all so afraid to take a chance? You know, why is it that first-time feature filmmaker is petrified that their first film might not work when everyone around them would look up to them if they failed, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a right side, left side of my brain that they are not harmonious. And that Instagram is not an app that I think has contributed much has not improved my life. Mm-hmm. You know, it's gotten me work, and the work has improved my life, but God, I wish that app didn't exist, because I wouldn't post on it if it wasn't like a part of filmmaking.
Yeah.
You know? Especially visual part of filmmaking, right? So I think, you know, maybe this is my own bias coming to the table, but as a colorist, especially when I was first coloring, there was like 9 people who color corrected, and we all knew each other, right? And so if I wasn't coloring the project, one of the people I know personally is, right? And today, there's still not that many colorists, but there's a lot more, and that just means that all of those feelings of seeing someone else coloring a project hurts more frequently, even as I'm working on cooler projects than I may have been working on 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think I know it stings the most. It's not like, wow, look at that incredible movie, I don't know a soul on the credits. In fact, if I see beautiful imagery, I'll look at the credits to make sure I don't know anyone, because if I don't, I'll feel much better, right? But when I see someone who I took stock in building them and then they're not working with me, that hurts, right? And I think that's probably always going to hurt. So I gotta change. I gotta change, because it's should be a lot easier to change me than to change them and everyone else. So, not to mention, you can't do every project you're scrolling through. It's ridiculous. Yeah. You know, as a colorist, a lot of us try to do every project, but you can't, right? So yeah, that is something that I'm working on, is to just be okay not doing everything. Even when it feels silly to say out loud, it's therapeutic to acknowledge it and to share that, right? I think that, you know, the mission of my 20s was basically to break me to the point where I could just feel I could just work all the time, and I got really good at fighting off burnout, because I would get burnout as soon as I had a couple hours of free time, and then I go back to working, I'd crave that free time, and then I'd burn out. That was the mission of my 20s. The mission of my 30s is, how do I just sit still? And whatever you do, don't go on Instagram, even though that's the only time I'm ever able to sit still. Yeah. Right?
What are you doing intentionally to go into your 30s with that kind of rest and sitting still?
I schedule my hobbies. And I'm 31, so I look at this as a 10-year project here. But when it's hard to find a hobby that takes all your time that's not repetitive. I need a project, right? Maintenance is like the antithesis of what energizes me. But if I have a project, and that can be as silly as, like, you know, wiring your TV console or something like that, and getting every wire to be completely invisible, right? Like, that kind of project, that's extremely good for me. That's exactly what I need. That's the medicine the doctor should be prescribing here. And so right now, when I think about music, when I think about programming, those are right now the hobbies that let me completely meditate away from color correction. And career and anything, you know, outside of just art and things that I enjoy doing. And the more that I do that, the better. And I'm probably going to course correct many times to try to figure out what's working to just feel okay not working, right? I mean, how do you make sure that you're okay? You don't let the voice in your head tell you that every minute you're not working, someone else is, right?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that every single time that you get reached out to a project that you feel okay saying no, even though you know that might cost you a relationship, right? That's something that I'm working on. And I'm probably going to watch a couple more of these interviews that you're doing to see if anyone else has the answer.
That would be, I hope so. I hope we'll get to it. But that's awesome, man. I love, hearing how intentional you are and how you're looking at things. I mean, partly it's, your brain operates in that, like you just said, like I need a project, I need a way. But it's just, I love hearing people that are taking intentional steps to look at areas of their lives where they're not as strong. Maybe they're not necessarily weak, but that's not, this area of my life is not my best. And how can I take intentional steps to identify those areas and then to work on them? Because it's easier to just be like, it's just the way I am.
Yeah.
I just work all the time, or I'm not great at whatever. But it's a lot harder to look at those things and go, okay, I need work, and it might take me the next decade of my life. Yeah. But I'm going to work on those things. Yeah. What you're saying is super, super helpful in thinking about how do I grow? How do I look at things in that long term and not get caught up in the so-and-so's doing this, I'm not working. And it's just thinking long term. Yeah. It's really hard to think long term. Yeah. But if you are developing that mission, if you're working on finding that passion, then thinking in decades versus thinking in days and months becomes a lot easier. Yeah. I mean, and obviously it's easier said than done, but it's it's very helpful to hear like your perspective on things, especially coming from, where you are in your career and the things that you've accomplished. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
I think that one of the things that I took away from what you were mentioning is that, or I should say it this way, a parallel that I've seen, especially in film school, is that I remember going into film school and them telling you freshman year, almost all of you guys won't be working in film. And I'm like, what in the world? Why would they tell you that? That's crazy. And I remember later figuring out, I know the group that's not going to be working in film. And it's generally the people that appreciate the end more than the means. Mm-hmm. It's usually the people who love watching films versus the people that love making films, and watching the films is secondary. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Take that same idea and graph it to your life. And if you live your life for the ends, not only will you not get there because you won't be able to think long term, because you're going to get burnt out by the means. Mm-hmm. And then what you're going to do is you're going to shorten your ends. You're going to say, okay, I can't look 10 years in advance. That's crazy. Maybe I can look 1 year in advance. And then, 3 months in, you're going to be like, I can look 4 months in advance, right? And suddenly you're shortening your ends because that's what you're living for, your ends. Yeah. But if instead you think about how do I live my life where the means are the ends, right? And the ends is just secondary, truly secondary. Just like when you're in film school and you're observing, I know all the filmmakers who are going to make it are the people who like being on set. They like being hot and sweaty. They like being behind the keyboard. And watching it is secondary. So if you can live your life by the means, thinking long term becomes quite easy, or a lot easier.
What I love about Rick Rubin, I don't know if you've read his book, but he talks so much about the process. Yeah. And when you look at it, what basically, in different words, but what you're saying is like, if you really learn to fall in love with the process and not just the outcome, then you'll have a way easier time. Yeah. Because even when it sucks and it gets really hard, which always happens, it's just inevitable. It's life. But if you're thinking it's easier to extract lessons from failures than to consider yourself a failure when you're thinking about the process. When you're really considering that you're ultimately, that's what life is. Like, there's no point when you're just arrived, there's no destination. Yeah. It's just, if you can learn how to work on the process or work and enjoy the process, then outcomes will come and go. Goals
Yeah.
will come and go and change in the next year, decade, like you said.
I think a funny analogy or analogy that you can kind of draw is, and I think everyone's actually probably pretty good at. I'm not a father, but I could imagine that when you have your first child, you're not looking at that child and thinking to yourself, gosh, imagine how much I'm going to love that kid when he goes to college. And he leaves. That's the ends, right? Most of us, I think, I would surmise, would go through raising a child kind of day by day.
Yeah.
And probably the most successful parents are probably the ones who enjoy the process. And the going to college is really the end of the process rather than the end, you know? You know. So think about your life through that same lens, is how do I find a process I love irrespective of the end, right? And suddenly you'll, you know, like find out what that, you know, like what journey do you love, right? And you'll find that you're really good at pursuing a journey if you love the journey, right? And you'll probably have great ends because you're going to be willing to do things other people wouldn't.
There's no, there's no end to the process, but yeah, man, you're full of wisdom and insight, and you know, not just experience and great work, but also, you know, it's really inspiring, and I think it's special to get to hear how you think about things and how you're looking at your own life, and it's really that part of being in service of others gonna stay with me. But you've said a lot of really insightful things, so I appreciate you talking, man. This is super, super awesome.
Well, I appreciate you including me, man. I think if I leave you with anything, I should first say that I think that the educator is often learning just as much as the people they're educating. So just as I'm communicating this and I'm putting vague ideas into words, I'm learning from myself right now. And my takeaway, and what I hope others take away, is if you start from a place of observing when you're happy as often as you observe when you're sad, you can use that counterintuitive behavior to find your guiding principles, your mission statement, right? Those guiding principles can help you find a journey that happens to lead to a happy ending, sure. But the journey itself is what you're really looking for. It's the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit part is really the most important part. And if you can find that pursuit, ultimately, I think right now, you have to interview me in a couple more years, see if I change my mind. But right now, I think that's what I'm going to strive for, to live my fullest life.
You said it. There's nothing else to add there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Well, thank you, man. This is a lot of fun.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy this conversation, please give us a follow, subscribe, and check out larkhouse.com to find out more about the different initiatives that we are developing to build community and to help artists like you realize their full potential. See you soon.